Absolutely. So getting to the strength and conditioning, you made a comment in there that you feel it's in good hands.
What's currently going on in Miami?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I feel it's in good hands. I think that it's looking right now, as far as who's injured, who's not, is looking a lot better. Prior last season, it was a triage unit, which was not good, right? Like, I mean, you can't be you can't have 80 guys on scholarship or whatever they had and have 30 of them out at some point. I mean, Van Dyke was injured, Garcia got injured at some point. Pretty much the entire offensive line went in and out. Is Zion Nelson ever going to play? I don't know. Jalen Rivers is a guy I'm really high on as a guard who they might have to play at left tackle. He blew his knee out, right? Like, you just saw guys drop like flies. Elijah Royal, one of the guys have been the highest on period of coming out of high school, just thinking, man, that guy looked put together. He blew his knee out. Restrepo with his foot. I mean, you could just sit there and list on and on, especially the offense. So what was going on, right? Were we seeing too many? There's an old saying about fall camp. August 1st through the September 1st, basically. We all call it camp. That is your team spending until October recovering from August? Like, that's a question you literally have. I mean, it's kind of a ha-ha, but it's like, no shit, is that true? If you were scrimmaging in your scrimmages, you have your 3 camp scrimmages and there are 150 plays like they were last year for Miami, that's trouble, because now you've got to recover from what happened to your body during that time. What else are you doing in camp? If you throw up, like literally, if there was, I can't remember who was talking about, like maybe it's Nebraska, and our guys are throwing up. Well, and they played like shit too, because your body literally has to go through such a process to recover from vomiting, that you've thrown the week of work away, right? This whole idea of, junction boys and guys throwing up and all this stuff. Once you start actually opening up a science textbook, that's not good, right? So you don't want guys throwing up everywhere. You're hoping that the point of your December all the way through August 1st, you're hoping that it all worked out. You shouldn't need a conditioning test. If they're not conditioned, fire me, right? Like, that's Kurt Hester says that all the time. If our guys aren't conditioned, fire me, because that was my job. So you're basically having a test to prove whether or not I did my job. Well, you can just look at them and tell me if I did my job, right? Like, so I think I'm hoping things have changed to become more scientific and less grind them up, chew them up, spit them out. Because you saw the injuries. You saw how everyone was exhausted for months. Do you want guys that look like they played a season in August, or guys that look like they played a season in January? Right? So you have to start wondering about that. They used to run in the sand, and oh God, there's a thing that people that are of our age fail to do sometimes, which is move on. And it's like, our time is done, right? Like, kids were making fun of me at the gym about the playlist, which was not mine. But I was like, so what if I did have the lame playlist on? I'm 40. I'm supposed to. Like, of course you hate what I listen to, right? Like, there has to be a moment where you admit you're not cool anymore, or the way that you did it may not work, right? Do you still go on? Are we on AOL right now on dial-up? Probably not, right? Like, I mean, did you change that? Are you still using AIM? Are you texting people? Or are you not? Like, at some point, are you still paying for minutes? Like, what the shit, man? I don't understand how people can't get past stuff that they did when they were 15, or that they saw when they were walking the campus back in, 2003 or whatever. Like, it's okay, man. Times change. And I hope that you've moved on, and I hope people can grow up. The dumbest person from high school is always the person who hasn't changed at all. You're like, God, you haven't grown one bit. If you went to your 20-year reunion, that person would be the same douchebag. That's terrible. So strength and conditioning needs to change with that as well, just like we're hoping you've changed from when you were 17. It's one of the most difficult things to talk about with somebody. When I was playing, nobody gives a damn. The kids don't care, right? Like, a Jason Taylor thing cracks me up, because I know there'll be guys on here that are going to be like, that's sacrilege. But it does. They aren't chasing rabbits anymore, only white rabbit. And they're going to say, but he won that. I don't care what you won. Who has he coached? Right? The players only care who you've coached. Wait a minute. Who did he develop? Oh, not a damn person, because he's only been a quality control guy. Now, when he puts 10 guys in the NFL, like the receiver coach at Ohio State, who wasn't a Hall of Fame NFL player. But nobody cares that he didn't play in the Hall. He didn't make the Hall of Fame because he's producing a Hall of Fame level of wide receivers. And that's the only part that matters right now. What he did on the field matters 0%. Nobody cares. You know what they care about? Hearing their name called on that stage. And so whatever Jason Taylor did as a player, I don't care. I want to know how he is as a coach. He stays here and watches tons of film. Maybe he doesn't like his wife. I don't know. Like, he could just be ducking going home. Maybe they send him pizza. Hell, I don't know. That time spent somewhere doesn't mean shit to me. Like, maybe you're wasting time. Maybe he has ADHD and he just wanders around aimlessly. I have no clue. Right? Who knows?
Oh, you make a lot of great points there. I could take off on a bunch of them, but we'll especially the time spent versus show me results. So show me production. Sure. It's great. Hey, you should be able to produce the best if you worked 60 hours and somebody else worked 40. That should produce more, but if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And you pay the guy that worked 40 hours if he's producing more. Staying on strength and conditioning, I'll just kind of blanket ask you about any kind of new trends or new thoughts there, because one stat that stood out to me in the podcast that you sent me was when they explained that the study of NFL offensive linemen that particular coach and others, he just looked at offensive linemen and what they could squat, talking about diminishing returns of strength, that the old adage of, we just want these guys to be able to squat 800 pounds because they're going to be better, obviously, if they can do that. Well, he found that there was a range of about 450 to 530, something in that range. And then after that, it was just kind of random. It didn't really matter past that. And obviously there's so much more technology to figure things out like that. What's out there right now in regards to what wasn't known, let's say, just a few years ago that you're discovering?
Yeah, I mean, with Kurt Hester, who's the Tulane strength coach that was on that podcast, he's had out a chart for a while that said that was from that research. He looked at every, he coached at LSU and they won 2 championships, I think, when he was there doing strength for the baseball team. They actually beat Miami on a grand slam at the end of a game, back in 97, let's say. And then he went and he did his own sort of facility work and prep guys. I think Alan Faneca, who played for the Steelers and played at LSU, he had him there at his Hall of Fame induction. Uncle Kurt, he's the wild man of strength and conditioning. But he had this chart that, he had done a lot of research on. And what it essentially said was, this is the point where most of these guys were around. And the rest of this, I developed players in high school too. Nobody in college gives a shit, trust me. But with that, and it was a certain range. Now, so somebody asked about Bain. Reuben Bain, they're making a big deal about how he said, I worked harder. We were just talking about working harder at Miami Central than he has at Miami. I'm sure the workouts at a high school with no sports science are quite stupid and are working you into death, right? But then all of a sudden his bench press in this weird, U-shaped sort of thing has gone up. But he's also now benching 400-something pounds, which doesn't really matter. Because if you look at Kurt's chart, a defensive end needs to stop about 315. And one of the highest ones is like 340 from like a defensive tackle. And that's it. So why is he still benching at 400, right? When you're looking at the back squat, Dr. Ray, who's now at New Orleans, but had that big run in 2020 with Alabama, right? He was at IMG and at Indiana. He says the back squat is 1.7 times body weight, and you can move on, right? So back squatting 1.7 times your body weight, move on. So this whole idea of people were saying it for a while, it's 3 times, 2.5. But at what point is it the law of diminishing return? I've only got so many tokens, in my book there that I can use, right? Like, I only have so many pieces of the puzzle, right? And so where am I going to spend them? What wins a football game? If a squat is heavy or a bench press and takes 5 seconds to do, the average play is 5 seconds, yes. But an offensive line, defensive line rep is actually won or lost in 0.45 seconds at the snap. 0. Dr. Ray said 0.45 seconds. So if you snap the football and it takes you 5 seconds to squat down and get back up, but I've just been ran through, right? Like I'm already on my back. What does it matter? You know, I've coached some extremely strong players who are terrible. I've coached some extremely weak players who are great. And then there's everybody in the middle, right? Where they're good or they're bad or, you know, or indifferent. I think that's a big thing is peak power and looking at some of those numbers. They've all got all the equipment to do that, you know. And of course, things like 1080s, which are, you know, have you sprint on a cable and they can tell you exactly what's going on with your sprint and, you know, the speed of it and it's expensive equipment. You know, it's like 30 grand for one of those, but they can afford that, obviously. You know, and being able to do work like that, scientific work. I mean, mental toughness, which everyone thinks is created in a sand pit somewhere in the middle of, you know, Coral Gables, Florida, of all places. To define mental toughness, you can't paint your fence a certain color, but hey, mental toughness in Coral Gables. But you're going to get that based on a sand pit? Like that's not where it's going to happen. The guy that wins the sandpit fight's the same guy who was going to win it anyway, whether you put him in the sandpit or not, right? Like that's just the majority of who we are is predetermined between ages 0 and 5 anyway, and then we're going to just keep on going. And some role models help and stuff like that, but for the most part, 50% of who we are is genetic, 10% is parenting. Parenting up to 0 to 5 is all of that, and then choice is just determined based on 0 to 5 more or less, and that's sad to say, but it's kind of how we are. So that's why you want to look back and see, you know, what somebody's done in the classroom and everything else, you know.